All right, everybody. College football is right around the corner, and I have 5 hot takes that's going to make you guys question whether or not I even know anything about the sport. But stick around and see if these hot takes come true. Let's get into this video.
Rising up the middle. He's in! Utah leads. Daniels for the win. Caught! It's gone! LSU does it! Mason Taylor!
Hey, what's up, everybody? I am Colin Bashnigal here, Bash's CFB show on TikTok, and welcome into this episode. I ask that you comment down below when we talk about what we are going to talk about today, because I feel like you guys are going to really like this video and really like the discussion that could come from this. You could also like and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. And you can see I've changed kind of the layout here just because it's a different type of video. I don't have the slideshow to go with it. It's just essentially me talking. We're going to fly through this video. It's going to be a lot shorter than those other videos, and I'm going to do a lot more of these. We're also going to do full-length podcasts type of shows for recaps and previews and stuff like that, and then segment them down and post them as individuals. So I will be going live on occasion to do that on YouTube, but I'll also trim down each individual segment of the show to make it a video. But we are splitting here. I'm going independent here. I'm splitting from the lowdown. So this is all me right here. No, all respect to those people at the lowdown. Make sure you check them out. That's kind of the last time I'm going to give a promo because we're moving on, trying to do our own stuff. It's not that I think I'm better than them. It's just there's some things that they're doing I don't necessarily align with, and schedules don't really align, and working things out just a little bit difficult at times. But all due respect to them. They do great work over there. So make sure you still check them out. Regardless, I am moving on to try to find myself within my own videos. It's not an ego thing. It's just, me wanting to pursue what I want to pursue. All right, 2023 hot takes of college football. Now, the way this is going to work, I'm going to let you guys know this. These are going to be hot takes that you guys are not going to agree on, and these are going to be hot takes that I have to explain a little bit of, and we are going to go conference by conference. All 5 of them are going to be one per Power 5 conference. I will include Notre Dame in the ACC, but I will tell you the ACC has nothing to do with Notre Dame. It's to do with the 2 teams at the top. Clemson, the favorites in the ACC, I think Clemson should be alone at the top. Now, Florida State has a really talented roster. They did an amazing job in the transfer portal, but they still do not have the talent that Clemson does. And you talk about Florida State, they have a schedule that's definitely manageable after the first bye, but with that or the first bye, the only bye on their schedule. But with that being said, this is a schedule set up with a bunch of trap games. You got Pitt on there, you got Clemson and LSU in the first month of the season. You have to go to Clemson. That's going to be really tough to do. And even if Florida State ends up losing one game in conference, they still have to play Clemson again, who I think could potentially have the matchup. So I think Clemson has the best chance to make the playoff out of those 2, and I think Clemson should be the favorites in the ACC. The other thing I will talk about is Clemson has more blue chip talent now than they did when they ran over or had that run of championship appearances and 2 national championships. Remember, they made 4 national championship games, and they made 6 playoffs consecutively, okay? This is a Clemson program that hadn't recruited at this high of a level the way they had the last couple of years. There are some concerns on this current roster. They have a ton of talent. Their wide receiver room looks different than it had the last 2 years. I think that this Clemson team could take a massive jump. If you want to look at their schedules, well, Clemson starts out with a tough game at Duke, but that's starting out the season, right? They have a little bit of a weaker out of conference. They don't necessarily stack up a bunch of trap games back to back. It was a little bit more difficult for me to find a loss outside of potentially Florida State and out of conference for Clemson. It was a lot harder with those other 7 games, not including Florida State and not including the 4 out of conference games. Those 7 games, a lot harder for me to find a loss for Clemson than it is for me to find a loss to or for Florida State. So overall, I think Clemson should be the lone favorite on top of the ACC. Big 12, Texas Tech's importance. We need to talk about Texas Tech's importance. This is the most important team in the Big 12. We are going to talk about Texas Tech because of Texas's expectations plus themselves, their own football team, their own football program equals failure more often than not the last decade. You give them expectations in a year like I think it was 2016 when they beat Notre Dame in Austin. You give them expectations like in 2018 when they went to the Big 12 championship. You give them expectations like in 2019 and 2020, and they have always fallen short. That might just happen again. And we cannot just buy that it's going to be different. It definitely could be, but we got to see it first to fully buy it, right? The Texas Longhorns being such a wild card like that makes Texas Tech extra important. They play the final game of the year. But the other part that's important about Texas Tech is they showed moments last year, and Joby McGuire is definitely building something. They brought in a good recruiting class, and they have a really good team coming back. If they're able to parlay this into a shocking 9 or 10 win season, that means you're going to have a couple of solidified programs who has competed with Texas and Oklahoma sticking in the Big 12, and we could truly consider them one of the power conferences now that we're seeing conference realignment take form, and the Pac-12 is virtually becoming irrelevant. Now you're going to have Dion. Now you're going to have a consistent Utah. Now you're going to have a program in Arizona and Arizona State, two programs there who have had flashes in this century. And then you have the TCUs, you have the Baylors, you have the Oklahoma States, you have the Matt Campbell in Iowa State, you have what Lance Leipold in Kansas is building. Texas Tech in the state of Texas, West Texas, all alone out there with Joey McGuire knowing that state so well and finding gems and diamonds in the rough in recruiting out of the state of Texas that are ranked a little bit lower because they play lower competition in the state of Texas or because of the fact that they're a little bit overlooked by some of the best talent in the best state for high school football. Joey McGuire has this program rolling. And if they can gain momentum here and they can continue that momentum in recruiting, Texas Tech, they are important. With Oklahoma and Texas now leaving, you have Texas Tech right there being able to make one last statement for relevancy before Oklahoma and Texas leaves. Again, scheduling talks, they avoid Oklahoma. They don't play Texas until the last game of the season. They could be 9-2 or 10-1 going into that final game. They have a road game or a home game. They host Oregon in the AT&T Jones Stadium. That's a chance to make a massive statement. I like this Texas Tech team, and I think that they are the most important team in the Big 12. Big 10 time. Iowa. Are we sleeping on Iowa a little bit too much because of their offense? Cade McNamara is a significant upgrade from Spencer Petras. Okay, Caleb Johnson going into another year. The offensive line was kind of rebuilding a little bit last season, hoping that they're going to be better. The wide receivers are a little bit more experienced, and they have tight end depth yet again. Luke Lachey is back. And then you also bring in Eric Gall, who's buddy with Cade McNamara, the quarterback. And you know that defense is going to be amazing. That secondary is certainly super experienced, headlined by Cooper DeJean. That defense is going to be really good. And Brian Ferentz on the hot seat, needing to score a lot of points. They're going to want to run up a little bit of the score. They're going to want to change something, and they're going to have to change something. And I think they know that. There's a reason why Kirk Ferentz is the longest tenured coach in college football. And it's because of the fact that he's been able to adjust with the times as much as Iowa's, recruiting base will let them. They can only do so much at Iowa because of the type of player that they're getting. But they have still changed based on the roster that they've had around them in the past. I'll give you a little bit of an idea. What they were able to do back in 2002 when they had a mobile quarterback was different than what they did in 2015, but both were tremendously successful years. That Iowa team went undefeated in conference play, 8-0, 11-1 overall with the one loss in the Cy-Hawk game against Iowa State, if I remember correctly. Now, of course, they did go on to lose the bowl game, but with that being said, you had a mobile quarterback there, one of the best quarterbacks in America, who was a Heisman contender, And then you had 2015, which was just a really tough defense, gutted out, and they had big plays happen on occasion with the quarterback that can, and CJ Beathard, of course, that could manage the game. And the same thing, 2021, completely different than 2015 because you didn't have that big arm quarterback. You had to count on scoring on defense a little bit more. And at the end of the day, and what they were able to do in between there with Nate Stanley, this Iowa program always changes, always evolves. That's what you guys got to pay attention to. To me, they are the favorites in the Big Ten West. You can talk about Wisconsin, but here's the problem with Wisconsin. They do not have the receivers to me. I am decent about Shamir DK. I am decent about Skylar Bell, but I went over this in the Wisconsin preview. The fact that they brought in transfers that hardly ever played in the first place does not mean they've upgraded at receiver. It means that they wanted more depth at receiver, and that's what we know about them. But they grab a CJ Williams from USC who has not done anything. They've grabbed a bunch of players who have not done much out of the portal. And you have Shamir DK, who has been the most productive college football receiver on roster, and we knew they would have that. Does that really matter? I don't think Shamir DK is going to be able to go up against first-round corners and consistently have success. I don't think that they're going to be able to dice up Iowa's defense with this air raid system that you guys are talking about. Wisconsin's best way of winning is how close are they going to be to Cincinnati in 2021? That is how you're going to be able to do it if you are Wisconsin. That's the blueprint right there. Phil Longo, great coach, great offensive mind. He does not have what he had at North Carolina on the perimeter. He does not have what he had at North Carolina at quarterback. I don't care what you say about Tanner Mordecai. He's not even Sam Howell, let alone Drake May. Okay? And the bottom line is this. Back in 2020, what did they do? They pared down the run game. Two-headed monster, Michael Carter. Remember him? Javonte Williams. Remember him? They're going to do that again with Chez Mellusi and Braylon Allen. That's their method of winning. And I don't think that they're going to be able to do that all day against an Iowa team. And I don't think that they're going to be able to do that against an Ohio State. And that might be the difference between Iowa and Wisconsin. The rest of them, let's talk about it real quick. Illinois, they lost a lot on defense. It might be rough starting out early on. We'll see if they're going to be able to make up that ground. But again, if Iowa's able to just lose one or two games in conference play, that's going to be a moot point because I think that Illinois is going to have a tough time exceeding that. Purdue, new coach. Going to be hard with all that they lost, including a head coach and the staff with a first-time coach in Ryan Walters. And that's where, by the way, it relates to Illinois. Northwestern, we know what's happening there, okay? Ben Bryant sticking it out. We'll see if they play for their old coach, Pat. But overall, they're a train wreck right now. Nebraska. You can talk about Nebraska all you want right now with all the hype. You got to see it to believe it. I think Matt Rule is doing a great job out there, but I don't think they're going to be good enough in year one to be able to contend with Iowa and Wisconsin. And then you have Minnesota. They're going through a bunch of stuff, and they're having a little bit of a change up there. They're going to have running backs that are inexperienced, receivers that aren't necessarily all that great. You have a good tight end, but a quarterback that I do not have a whole lot of confidence in. So overall, Iowa should definitely be the favorite in the West, and I think we are sleeping on Iowa a little bit. That's my hot take in the Big Ten. Here's a hot take in the Pac-12. Someone other than USC represents the Pac with a question mark here. Because I do not think USC is the most likely team in the Pac-12 to make the college football playoff. Oregon comes to mind to start. They're a team who gets USC at home. They're a team who wants revenge off of Washington from last year. They're a team that gets an opportunity on the road at Texas Tech, who I think is going to be a good team. And if they're able to make that travel and that trip and beat Texas Tech, watch out for Oregon. They have a good out-of-conference game right there. Not great, but a good one. And they play against all these teams that are going to be able to boost their resume. They can go 11-1, get to the Pac-12 championship, win the Pac-12, get to the playoff. They're more likely. USC, on the other hand, has tough stretches. For starters, they have to go all the way to South Bend in the middle of Pac-12 play. That's tough, right? They do not do that last game of the year. They also get a week 0 game, an early bye, and then they get a bye before the conference championship. Now, if USC manages to go 11-1, that bye before the conference championship is going to be massive. But are they going to go 11-1? I don't necessarily think they should be going 11-1. I think you are hard-pressed to say that they're going to go on the road across the country, middle of Pac-12 play, and beat Notre Dame. Now, they got to get used to it, but that's going to be the kind of wake-up call that you get with going to the Big Ten. And then beating all these teams like Oregon, or even like trap games like Cal or Arizona. It's not necessarily going to be that easy for USC. And the schedule is not necessarily tough, or that easy, I should say. It's pretty tough. We will break down USC's schedule and what I think USC is going to do this year. But also look at Washington. Their tough out-of-conference road trip, Michigan State. They handled them last year without any sort of doubt. And Michigan State seems like more of a disaster now than they were last year. And then you also factor in the fact that Washington has a decent draw and they get Oregon at home this year. The winner of that Oregon-Washington game probably has a better chance of making the playoff than USC. You got Michael Penix, Bo Nix. They're not that much farther behind than Caleb Williams, who's the best quarterback in college football. And finally, the SEC. Connor Wakeman is the guy I'm going to bring up. He is the real best quarterback in the SEC. A lot of you guys are going to project forward and say Joe Milton. A lot of you guys are going to talk about KJ Jefferson when he does not necessarily have the best accuracy down the field. And he's a good runner, but overall, he's also not really going to have the receivers. The talent around Connor Wakeman at Texas A&M and the beautiful ball that he has, if Bobby Petrino is working with him instead of basically Jimbo, those mechanics are not going to be messed up the way that some of the other quarterbacks that they had like Kellen Mond, for example, Trevor Knight, those mechanics were messed up. Watch out for Texas A&M now. I'm not going to go off the rails and say that they're going to be a great team because I just don't know how this whole entire Jimbo and Bobby experience is going to be. But with that being said, if they get everything out of Jimbo and Bobby, this is going to be a fantastic team, and Connor Wakeman is going to be the best quarterback in the SEC. I mean, name him. You're projected forward with Joe Milton, right? You don't even know who's going to be the starter in Oxford. You don't even know who's going to be the starter in Tuscaloosa. We think that Carson Beck's a pretty good player. We don't know that as a fact. Do you really trust Spencer Rattler to take a massive leap? Do you really trust that Devin Leary's all that good after what we saw last year? There's not a quarterback you can name that you could convince me is better than Connor Wakeman without a shadow of a doubt. Oh, Joe Milton can throw it 100 yards. It's great. Last time I checked, you're trying to complete balls to the receivers, not throw it to the girl in the stands. That's all I'm going to say about that. All right, everybody. Like I said, make sure you like and subscribe. Comment down below what you think of all my hot takes. Hate takes. It's not hate, okay? Those are the hot takes I have. Not necessarily my best video I've ever done, but you know what? It's the first time that we're doing a non-prediction video in quite some time. So with that being said, thank you guys for tuning in. Really appreciate it. And make sure you check out what else I got going on the channel.